Can I be angry for a moment?
Take me to the water. Strong buzz in my mind. Take me to the water. Strong buzz in my mind.
Let's start with this fact. 5 trans and non-binary youth from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania have died by suicide in 18 months. This is the exact same time period as the state senator who represents Lancaster County and who's also Republican Majority Whip repeatedly sponsored, co-sponsored, and pushed his colleagues to vote for anti-LGBTQ and anti-trans legislations. His name is State Senator Ryan Aument. 1 county, 1 period, 1 public leader, 5 trans youth suicides. Here's another fact. Even though Senator Aument is culpable in the suicides of these 5 LGBTQ youth, he's now attempting to misdirect our attention away from himself by saying that the problem is social media, or that we're blaming his book ban, or that I'm trying to profit off of these kids' deaths. Well, to Senator Aument, I say,
bullshit. You're trying to make yourself feel less guilty. Well, fuck if I'm going to help you do that.
About a month ago, I drove 7 hours from Vermont and protested Senator Aument at the Pennsylvania State Capitol. I made 3 demands of him, including the simplest and most human, that he publicly convey condolences to the parents of these 5 deceased LGBTQ youth from his home county of Lancaster. However, to date, he's declined to do so. Because of my protest against him, I was arrested and jailed. During my arraignment, just before he set my bail at $5,000, the judge asked me the same thing lots of folks have asked me since. Why would a Vermont filmmaker drive 7 hours to the Pennsylvania State Capitol to protest a lone state senator? Well, the answer is simple. Because this is where 5 trans kids died by suicide. Republican State Senator Ryan Aument is culpable because he poured toxic poison into our culture. Now he's disappeared, ghosting us with no accountability whatsoever.
Harmful how? What would you get?
Hey, with repeated exposure to toxic levels, God, anything really, from chronic headaches and nosebleeds to respiratory disease, liver failure, heart failure, reproductive failure, bone or organ deterioration, plus, of course, any type of cancer.
Have you ever seen the movie Erin Brockovich? Directed by Steven Soderbergh, it's the true story of Erin Brockovich, played by Julia Roberts, who discovers that a corporation has dumped millions of gallons of poisonous chemicals that have leached into the community's groundwater, causing health problems for hundreds of adults and children, including cancer and many deaths.
I understand they've had a bad run of luck, health-wise, and they have my sympathies. But that's not PG&E's fault.
You're kidding, right? They have had
Breast cysts, uterine cancer, Hodgkin's disease, immune deficiencies, asthma, chronic nosebleeds.
A million things could have caused those problems. Poor diet, bad genes, irresponsible lifestyle.
Hey, did you catch what that lawyer just said? That's not our fault, and a million things could have caused those problems. Sound familiar? Let's do a thought experiment. Behind me is a pretty big body of water, Lake Champlain. Just for a moment, imagine that the United States is a single body of water like this, and imagine that this is a jar of extremely toxic poison in the form of anti-LGBTQ legislation. Now, if one state leader, such as Senator Aument, pours this extremely toxic poison into our water in the form of anti-LGBTQ legislation, in isolation, one jar of poison probably doesn't do much. But when public leaders from all over the country begin pouring jars of poison into our water over and over again in the form of hundreds of anti-LGBTQ bills, mostly affecting kids, there's a point when the whole lake turns toxic. Then, that poison comes to LGBTQ kids in all kinds of ways, like bullying at school, community intolerance, shutting down home conversations, and hatred on social media, followed by kids feeling anxious, lonely, and isolated. Then later comes cancer in the form of self-harm and thoughts of suicide. Now, if there's something I know about, it's cancer. Right now, in my lungs and bones, I have a rare stage 4 cancer. It's so rare that each year only a couple hundred people get this kind of cancer. My doctors are certain that my cancer came from toxic radiation that was administered to me over 30 years ago. This is important. I didn't get cancer when my body was exposed to toxicity. I got it later. So while Senator Aument and Republican leaders might be trying to move on, in essence saying that these trans youth deaths are non-issue, while simultaneously trying to misdirect our attention away from the toxic anti-LGBTQ poison that they poured into our national waters, it's still making kids sick, spiritually, mentally, and physically. Search TikTok and YouTube, and you can find thousands of videos of kids from all over the country who are deeply shaken, frightened, and crying over issues facing trans and LGBTQ youth.
It just breaks my heart to know that all this anti-trans legislation is leading to so much violence. I don't know, man. It just really messes with my head to think that children are being lost. They don't get the good parts of transitioning or just being whoever. They don't get to find their communities, and they don't get to grow and blossom because of this type of shit.
They are so right. Because of this type of shit, bad things have happened. Our national waters have been poisoned, and 5 beautiful young souls died by suicide. We have got to hold accountable those Republican leaders who are culpable, including a state senator from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, named Ryan Aument.
Take me to the water. Troubles in my mind.